So this is what's going on in the world. Protest against lockdown in Texas, California, and 7 other states as calls to end stay-at-home orders grow. All right, so there's been these protests going on, and it's people protesting, quote unquote, protesting to open up the country again. And this is tyranny. And most of them are just Trump rallies too. Like most of them are just, Trump rallies, people supporting Trump. So here's what the Newsweek article says. Protests against statewide lockdowns and stay-at-home orders have been taking place over the last week, with demonstrations in 9 states yesterday: California, Florida, Texas, Arizona, Colorado, Montana, Washington, Tennessee, and Illinois. All saw protesters gather in large numbers, many not practicing social distancing or following government guidelines intended to prevent the spread of the coronavirus, demanding that the governors reopen their states. Despite contradicting government guidelines, President Trump has called the protesters very responsible and has said that some governors have gone too far with their stay-at-home orders. Trump also tweeted, "Liberate Michigan, liberate Minnesota, liberate Virginia, and save your great Second Amendment. It is under siege." By the way, no one's coming after your guns. All right. It's not going to happen. No one in government is going to touch your guns. I mean, I don't know. You don't have to take it from me. Just take it from. No one's going to do anything. Republican, Democrat, we will never see a common sense weapons policy in this country. We're just not. We're not going to see it. You're never going to see it. At least not in my lifetime. Maybe someday. But I have zero confidence. And I hope so bad I'm wrong. I hope so bad that we do get a common sense gun policy in this country so that school shootings don't happen every other day. But I have zero confidence we ever will. Why do you have zero confidence we ever will, Ron? Because they're shooting our children and no one has done anything. That's why. And boy, do I hope I'm wrong. I want to be wrong so bad. But if someone was like, "Do you have any confidence?" No, I don't. If you want me to lie to you, I could do that. But why should I? I'm being honest. I have zero confidence that we will ever see anything change. And when it comes to gun policy in this country, zero confidence. And it saddens me to say that. I don't like that I feel that way. But the NRA has a complete stranglehold on all of our politicians. And I just don't see it ever changing. I really don't. I hope I'm wrong. Sincerely hope I'm wrong. But, if someone said, "What's one thing?" I believe that someday we could live in a country where we have media policy that would make something like CNN illegal. I believe that we could live in that country one day. Norway has policy like that, and I believe the United States can too. And that I'd live to see it, and we'd all live to see it. I believe that we can live in a country where we have an alternative to this money party duopoly. I really do believe that. I believe we can do something about climate change and reverse the course, or at least, ease the course, so to speak. I mean, we're not going to, quote, stop climate change. It doesn't work that way, but we can, adapt and do better. I really do believe that. I believe that we can bring a lot of goodness in our communities. I really do believe that. But as far as the stranglehold the NRA has, as far as ever getting a common sense gun policy in this country, I don't think I'll see that in my lifetime. I suppose I shouldn't say it'll never happen, but I don't think in my lifetime it will. I think we're probably about 100 years away from something like that. That's one area where I just have zero confidence. Because when you see, anyway, I don't know what got me on that spiel. Probably because Trump's talking about the Second Amendment. It's in trouble. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I hope I'm wrong on that one. I desperately want to be wrong there. Even though some states, including Texas and Montana, are planning on lifting or loosening restrictions this week, some residents took to their state capitals to protest what they see too slow a process and reopening their state economies, or as a loss of their constitutional rights. See, we're doing what you have to do during a pandemic. Your protest should not be to reopen the economy and to do something irresponsible that's going to make people sick. The protest should be our government, our federal government, should be doing a better job handling this pandemic and actually helping people instead of giving trillions to the banks with no strings attached. We have the money. We have the money to give everybody a decent UBI so that we can get through this. But government doesn't want to. Your Congress and your federal government, Democrats and Republicans alike, just handed the banks trillions and then went on vacation. And they said, hey, banks, take care of it. And what happened? A bunch of people didn't get those PPP loans, but the banks don't have to answer to anybody. This is beyond obscene. Beyond obscene. So your protest is not to the governors to reopen the economy and to tell the medical community to go pound sand and to tell the science community to go pound sand. Your protest is protesting that the government doesn't do better on this for the people. That's the protest. And by the way, some of those protests are going on. It's really interesting that you'll hear the corporate media report on this stuff. They'll report on the protests to reopen, the Liberate protests, which are basically just Trump rallies. They'll report on those. But they won't report on other things that are going on in regards to canceling rent, in regards to a general strike. Because let me tell you something, that's going on too. In fact, here's something from my very own YouTube channel. You don't see stuff like this covered in Newsweek, do you? But here's something. Oh, wait, is this from my, oh yeah, this is an ad, but here, we don't need the sound for this, so I'm going to turn the sound off. But check this out. This was taken from the tenants union protest yesterday. You were encouraged to protest from your car to practice social distancing. So the people outside are some of the organizers of the protest, and everyone else is inside of their car. So we followed the instructions to social distance. And this protest is going on right now, too. And you don't hear the media talking about that, first of all. But so keep in mind that there are two different types of protests going on right now. One is protesting the inaction of our leadership in Washington and the giveaway to the banks, and is calling for a rent strike, and is calling for a general strike, and is calling for no vacancies, and is calling for unethical landlords to be held accountable. That's what this strike is doing. The strike I attended yesterday, that's what this strike is doing. But you don't hear about those strikes, do you? No, you don't hear about those strikes. You hear about these strikes. Or excuse me, these protests. These are the protests you hear about. You don't hear about the protests calling for a rent strike, calling for a general strike, calling for no vacancies. You hear about these protests. You hear about the protests saying, reopen the economy, pro-Trump. That's what you hear about. Why? Because the media wants you to liken those two together. I even got it. There were people on my Instagram and my Twitter that when I was tweeting out stuff from the protests that I attended, which was organized by the LA Tenants Union and other groups, Sunrise Movement was there, calling for a rent strike, calling for no vacancies, calling for unethical landlords to be held accountable. People were saying, "Oh, why are you at that? Why are you at that pro-Trump thing? Why are you at that?" There were people who didn't realize that that wasn't the type of protest I was going to. They thought they were the same protest. And now, here's where it also gets a little muddy. My editor Joe shares this with me. Facebook, the one and only, is getting involved, which, what can go wrong when Facebook gets involved, really? Zuckerberg, some stay-at-home protest organized on Facebook could qualify as harmful information. Okay, here we go. All right. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg on Monday told ABC's George Stephanopoulos that protest of stay-at-home orders that violate state social distancing rules organized through his social media platform qualify as harmful misinformation and will be taken down. How do you deal with the fact that Facebook is now being used to organize a lot of these protests to defy social distancing guidelines in states? The Good Morning America anchor asked Zuckerberg, if somebody is trying to organize something like that, does that qualify as harmful misinformation? Here's what Zuckerberg said. We do classify that as harmful misinformation, and we take that down. Now, here's the problem once again. Look, I don't agree. I strongly disagree with the protests that are going on to, quote, reopen America. I think some of those, like some of the people at that protest, it's just a pro-Trump protest. For a lot of people, it's basically just a Trump rally. And for other people, I think they are feeling desperate. And I just think they are misdirected. There's a lot of people there that are just saying, I want to get my hair cut. Liberty. But then there's other people that I think they're there because they are desperate. But your protest should not be to reopen the economy and risk more people dying. Your protest should be against the government and against the leadership and against the banks for not handling this properly, and for calling on them to handle it properly, calling on them to freeze rent, to freeze mortgages, to give people an emergency UBI. We got the money for that many times over because they just handed trillions to the banks. If they can hand trillions to the banks, they can give people what people need to survive during this pandemic. Other countries are doing it. There's a UBI in Canada. I know there's a process to get it. It's not perfect, but there's still a UBI most people have access to. In England, they're covering most people's wages. Other countries are doing significantly better than one-time payment USA, baby. So while I strongly disagree with those protests, the protest that I do agree with is like the one I showed up yesterday to, the protest to protest rent, to call for a rent strike, to call for no vacancies, to call for unethical landlords being held accountable. And the problem is that Facebook might cancel these types of protests as well. They might also cancel these types of protests. The LA tenant unions protest. There's an ad. That's so ridiculous. That's so annoying. They'll protest stuff like this too. They won't just protest, or excuse me, they won't just take down the protest to end the stay-at-home order. They'll take down stuff like this too. This is why you shouldn't have Facebook determining what is and isn't free speech. You shouldn't have Facebook determining. And again, they shouldn't be able to take anything down unless it blatantly violates free speech laws. And this is why. Because it's like, yeah, well, these protests are dangerous. I get that. Yeah, but here's the thing. They'll do stuff like this too. They'll do stuff like this too. Now, I do think that all protests, whatever your cause is, whether I agree with it or not, should practice social distancing. I do feel that way. People should have masks on. People should be in their cars when possible. If you're not an organizer of the protest, be in your car. I am for that. I stayed in my car this entire protest. You see people social distancing in this video. When people marched, they were staying apart from each other. I'm for all that. And, in a protest like this, people are more likely to social distance than in a protest where people are against the concept. So I get it. But yeah, the problem is Facebook has no qualifications to determine what is and isn't a safe protest or a not safe protest. They just have no qualifications to determine any of that. But they're going to anyway, once again. And I guarantee you, Facebook will not help the situation one way or another. They just won't. Facebook just won't. They just won't.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news